Why don't Indian guys say please and thank you? And is that normal? My name is Malaikanary. I'm a professional Indian matchmaker. This is video number 2 in our series on the 13 items that you need in a husband material man from my checklist on how to find a husband material man, how to spot him, and what you need to see in that guy in order to categorize him as husband material. If you'd like the full checklist, please click on the link below and access all 13 items so that when you see these items in a guy, you know, okay, this is a man who's going to make a great husband. I want to talk about being respectful and polite. What exactly does that mean? So, in the checklist, you'll find a description that corresponds to our typical expectations of someone who's respectful and polite. They say please and thank you. They might pull out the chair for you. They respect your privacy. They respect your boundaries. They won't try to pry into your personal life. They definitely won't ask you, hey, how long has your dry period been? They're very considerate and thoughtful about other people in general. And if there's any conflict that comes up between the two of you, he will use I feel statements to deflate any tension that arises instead of getting aggressive or defensive. This is a respectful and a polite person. He will also treat everyone fairly and equally. He's an honest man with good character, and he is culturally sensitive and shows respect for the diversity of cultures and traditions that might exist in your environment or in general. But today, I want to delve a little bit deeper into this concept of being respectful and polite and share with you a couple of stories to explain why being respectful and polite is not always the easiest thing to find. And when you do find it, you might not see what you're expecting to see based on this checklist. Now, I actually learned the 5 golden words, please, thank you, excuse me, sorry, etc., in school. It was not something that I learned at home. My parents are both educated professionals. They did their absolute best in raising me and my sister to be polite individuals. And especially, they were really careful because we grew up in our childhood in India. They were really careful about teaching us to treat people in the different parts of society, the household help, people on the streets, etc., as well as our own family members, with the same degree of respect. So I think they did a really great job, and they never talked to us about the caste system our entire childhood. I actually found out about the caste system after I'd left India. But we didn't really learn the whole please and thank you situation. It wasn't that common. And I find that it's not all that common in India in general. I went to a Catholic school when I was a child, and the nuns at the school one day, they were like, okay, here are the 5 golden words, read them and study them, and then come home and we're going to test you on them tomorrow. So I treated it just like all of our other lessons on grammar and Hindi vocabulary words at school. But the more that I began to practice saying please and thank you, the more that I realized just how uncommon these words were in the English vocabulary for Indians in general. In fact, this is something that I had to teach my own parents how to say. When we were at home, we were having dinner together, and my dad said, hey, I'd like some rice. Uh, he thought, okay, we're family, you're my daughter, you should just pass me the rice because I want some rice. And I said, okay, Dad, you're going to have to say to me, please, could you pass me the rice? And then wait, because it was a request, not a command. I realized that this was dismantling this vocabulary. These so called simple, non political words were actually challenging the bedrock of our Indian culture, because our Indian culture is very much based on hierarchy and respect for your elders. Similarly, every time that I've come back to India, I notice that people don't say please and thank you to anyone who is a station below them on the social ladder. So this means the maids, the drivers, the guy in the street who is making you serving you a soda or a pani puri. People generally don't say thank you, and nobody seems to mind. In fact, when I, with my foreign sensibilities, go around saying thank you so much, thank you so much, thank you so much to everyone, they kind of smile like, is she a fool? So I don't know if they really like it or not. And I don't know if I'm just being too American or something. But I've noticed that this whole please and thank you mindset, it's not really present in Indian society. And everyone seems fine with it. There are no wars. There's nobody protesting in the street. So this is story number one. I didn't really grow up with please and thank you, and it's something that I've had to educate my parents on how to do in our own nuclear family, especially after I started living in the United States and I saw, oh wow, Americans say please and thank you for everything, especially if you go to a restaurant, the waitress will tell you 10 times, oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you so much for ordering with us. Thank you so much for visiting us. And this thank you and please mindset got so deep into my psyche, especially once the whole gratitude journal movement came out and we were encouraged to be thankful for everything, including the bad days. The next big occasion in the whole judging people on being how respectful and polite they are happened when I was in college. I was given a scholarship by the Swiss government to go to Switzerland, work in a university on a research project, and then come back and discover how awesome Switzerland was. So I went to Switzerland. I had a wonderful time. I loved my experience. And then at the end of the summer, I flew back to New York to do my next semester at NYU. So that semester, we had a contingent of delegates from the Swiss government. The same guys who had awarded me my scholarship came to my university to give a presentation. And after the presentation, we went out to dinner. So the waitress brought our food and our drinks to the table. And these guys sitting next to me, they are smart, intelligent, serious professionals, and they would be considered husband material men. Back then, I was like 20 years old, and they were in their early 30s. So I wasn't thinking about getting married. I wasn't thinking about dating them. I just thought, oh, wow, they're attractive. But that was where it ended. I wasn't looking at them as husband. I wasn't thinking about marriage at all. I was super young, still doing my degree. And they were just there on a business trip. So they weren't looking at me as wife material either. They were just there to have a nice evening and go back home to Switzerland. As the waitress served us, I said thank you when she brought me my meal. And then these two Swiss guys who were wealthy, successful professionals with these very prestigious jobs in the Swiss government, she brought them their meals and they said nothing. Nothing. I was shocked. I think I nearly fell off my chair because I was like, do people not say thank you in Switzerland? And Switzerland, if you know anything about the country, it's divided into 4 languages, and the people who speak each language are really separate from each other. It's like a very siloed society. So I was in the French part where people are much more like the French than they are the German Swiss. And the German Swiss are kind of their own thing. And then you have like Italians and Romansh, so it's 2 other languages. And these guys were from the German part. So although they were from Switzerland and I had just been living in Switzerland thanks to my scholarship, they didn't really have anything in common with the French Swiss around whom I'd been. And I spoke a little bit of French. A lot of the people I met in Switzerland spoke perfect English. So while I was in Switzerland, I spoke a mix of French and English, and I didn't speak any Swiss German. So these guys, when they came, they spoke perfect English. And when we were in New York, we only spoke English together. The whole time at that dinner, I'm asking myself, is there not a word in German for thank you? And I kept wondering about this, couldn't figure it out, remained baffled that entire night. Many years later, I moved to Germany and I discovered that Germans are extremely polite. There is a word in German for please. There is also a word for thank you. And there is also a word for excuse me. And it's all the same word. It's a 5-letter word, bitte, that the Germans use for everything. They're constantly saying this, using this word for every situation. They're exceedingly polite, and they will never like bump you in the street without saying, oh, please, like go ahead. And they say bitte. So the Germans are very polite. And I kept asking myself, if the Germans are so polite, why didn't these Swiss German guys use the word please at our dinner? So I chewed on it for many years thereafter. And then years later, I moved to Paris and I started living in Paris. At this point, I spoke really good French. It's really comfortable in the language. And you know the French word for thank you is merci. It's a well-known international word. And I noticed that although people said merci, it wasn't like it was a waterfall from their mouths. You know, they would use the word if it was really necessary, if you did something that really needed to be thanked for. Like if you say, hey, can you pass me that book? And I take the book and I give it to you, you'd say, okay, merci. And that was how it worked in France. But if someone brought you your meal at the restaurant, sometimes people said merci and sometimes they didn't. So at this point, I'm again asking myself, all right, It's been years of me wondering, am I the only one who says please and thank you? And I realized, you know what? Please and thank you is really cultural. Sometimes please and thank you can even be considered rude. And that was what was happening in my own family when I started trying to teach my parents, my very Indian parents, to say please and thank you on a daily basis. They saw it as bringing this element of formality into our intimate relationship. So if you are going out looking for this Indian husband, especially if he's been living in India or he's been brought up in a very traditional Indian family, he might not have this habit of saying please and thank you, which might lead you to conclude, okay, he's not respectful and polite. But in reality, this concept of respect and politeness is about how we feel and communication, which is all very, very cultural. So what does that mean for you? You might be sitting wondering, Kimalika, you've said I should look for a respectful and polite guy, and you've also said guys can be really different in how they express that they're respectful and polite. So what should I do? Totally fair question. Here is my recommendation to you. Number one, recognize that respect and politeness are really cultural. You don't want to be Malika sitting there in 2010 with these Swiss German guys wondering, why the heck aren't they saying please and thank you? And I judged them back then, being super young, still in college. I was like, are these guys rude? And years later, I realized, number one, they were on a business trip and probably super jet lagged. Number two, they were just there for work. They weren't there to prove a point. And number three, the number of times you say please and thank you is probably really different in Switzerland than it is in New York. So context matters. Secondly, remember that we often need to train men to behave as we want. So coming back to my own dad, now I love my dad. We have a good relationship. But when I've asked him to do things that are normal for our generation, but not normal for his generation, it's been hard for him. Naturally, just like many things that he's asked me to do have been hard for me to adapt to. And saying please and thank you was one of these things. I remember us having a conversation where I was like, oh, Indian men never say thank you. And he was like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah, just like you. And he laughed. And in that moment, I realized, okay, this is maybe a generational thing. It may be an Indian man thing. But what does it matter if I'm the only one complaining about it? Like, there are millions of Indian men on the planet. Some of them are respectful and polite. Some of them are not. And I need to just move on from my obsession with hearing people say thank you. So that's point number two. My recommendation to you is that if it really matters to you, just like it matters to me, then you probably need to train that person, that man in your life, to say it over time. It took me more than 10 years to train my dad to say it, and I don't know how successful I was, but I can tell you today that we still have a good relationship, and that if I need something, if I need help, or if I just need a listening ear, my father is always there for me. And ultimately, that love and that support is what truly matters in an intimate, long-term relationship. And finally, the way that you want respect and politeness expressed to you might be unique to you. In fact, it most likely will be unique to you. In every intimate relationship between two partners, in every marriage, there are things that work and will work in your marriage that might not work in someone else's marriage. This has been a hard lesson for me to learn, because when I would read books or try to implement things I learned at school, I discovered, hey, some people like them and some people don't. It's up to you to figure out what is going to work for your particular situation or environment. I recently met this guy, Indian guy, grown up in the US, and we got along super well. And we were having this meal together, and the waitress brought us our food, and she served me first, and I said, thank you. And she served him next, and he said, thank you. And I was like, huh, wow, that's so nice that he said thank you to the waitress, because he didn't need to. I mean, she would have done her job anyway, right? But later I asked myself, if I liked him anyway and he hadn't said thank you to the waitress, would that have stopped me from liking him? Probably not. So what you like about a guy is ability to treat you with kindness and thoughtfulness, his ability to listen to you, how interested he actually is in your life, how attractive he is. All of these things might be more important for you than the fact that he says thank you to the waitress. So the next time you're evaluating a man, trying to decide, is he worth my time? Are we matching? Do we have the same values? Observe how he behaves and ask yourself, if this never changes, will I care? The answer might be no. So what I realized in that moment, watching this guy who'd grown up in the US say thank you to the waitress, I was like, it's great that he said thank you, but he's not stupid. I'm sure he could learn to say thank you, even if he didn't normally do it. And he would have to learn if his life depended on it, if it mattered. So, in closing, respect and being polite are super important in a husband material man, but it's also about how he expresses that based on the way that he has been raised and how the way that he expresses being respectful and being polite makes you feel. If some of his behavior genuinely hurts your feelings, you express it to him. Hey, this behavior makes me feel X emotion. You're not saying, you do this and I hate it. No, you're expressing your feelings, your emotions about his behavior and saying, I feel disrespected when. And then he doesn't change his behavior, or he refuses to change his behavior, or he shuts down. Then you know this is a man who is closed to change, and that's probably not someone for me. But if, like most guys, he says, oh, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings. I had no intention of hurting you. And please help me understand what was going on so I can do differently next time. If he responds with that openness and that kindness and that willingness to try something different in his behavior, then you know that you have found a guy who's willing to be respectful and polite to you because he genuinely has a growth mindset and has the intention to build with the right woman by his side. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see the rest of the 12 items on my husband material man checklist, just click through the playlist of the husband material man checklist. And if you'd like the actual checklist in PDF form, just click the link below and download it. It's completely free. My gift to you so that you can spot your husband material man.